"Ready?" Tom asked, giving his wooden sparring blade a few practice swings. It really was remarkably crafted. He wasn't much of a swordman himself, but he could appreciate the lengths that the Templar's carpenter had gone to make the thing feel real. The elf didn't speak. He simply locked eyes, nodded briefly, and made the first lunge. It was beautiful. There was a flow to it, a sort of aesthetic grace that made it incredibly easy to predict. Tom simply moved one step left to avoid the strike and winced at the flourish his opponent made before lashing out with a useless little kick. In his eyes, there was nothing more elvish than waste made in the name of beautifying an intrinsically ugly thing, making war into a dance move. He grabbed the elf's foot right as he started to pull back, and yanked with all his might. The elf had enough balance to avoid toppling, but not enough strength to wrest the foot back, simply hopping forward to keep upright. The two sparring partners were too close for the sword to be of any good, but Tom had always treated weapons like a necessary evil at best. He was perfectly content to make do with a simple headbutt to the mouth. So he did. He didn't put enough force into it to break a tooth, but that wouldn't stop it from hurting like shit. He took his chance throwing the elf again, and this time the pointy-eared bastard flopped into the dirt. Those two eyes, far too childish for the century of life they'd witnessed, blinked a few times in disbelief. Tom took the opportunity to take 3 steps back, but did nothing else. Eventually, pride overrode pain, and the elf pulled himself to his feet. They squared off a second time, until the elf once again made the first move. It was more clever than the last rush. One hand flung an orb of conjured flame, the other swung the wooden blade in the opposite direction of the fire. He clearly expected Tom to launch the opposite way and carry himself into the attack. It probably would have worked with most humans, whose fear of magic was pathological, but Tom had no such compulsion. He didn't twitch as the ball of flame flew harmlessly a few inches left of his face. He simply countered the blow, and used an inside kick to knock the elf back into the dirt. There was a moment's pause as the century-old elf realized that it had been bested, easily, 2 times in a row, by someone that his people would have viewed as a child, no less. It took a few more moments to mull that particular thought over. Then he spoke. "You barely moved." An observation, not a complaint. Tom had bested enough elves to recognize the difference between the two. Normally he'd have been content to keep throwing his opponent back into the dirt, but this seemed like a teachable moment. Movement is tiring. Tired people are slow. Slow people get killed. The elf shook his head. "Don't you care about showing off your skill? Being intimidating?" Tom squatted down low, making a point of keeping his eye contact level with the man currently sprawled in the dust. "You aren't intimidated by the prospect of making another rush at me?" The elf looked down thoughtfully, before raising a hand up and watching the dust fall for his fingers. He watched it drift up and out, towards the sunset, then turned his attention back to Tom. "I am." "You should be. You waste energy with useless movements. You focus on forms you practiced over what's useful in the moment, and you treat your magic like it's just something to help you get an opening with your sword. Anything that is not ruthless is wasteful. Try again." The elf pushed himself from his sprawl and took a moment to wipe the dust off his hands. Tom had the kindness to wait until he was at least half finished before he made his charge. The elf didn't flinch. Hands still pushed together, he sidestepped Tom's charge with the casual ease that humans have spent millennia envying. One hand stayed up as the other reached for the sword at his belt, and Tom was impressed to see half a fire sigil cast, concealed behind the wiping of dust gesture. The elf tried a broad shoulder-to-hip cleave, a move that Tom only barely managed to duck under. Recognizing that he had scarce moments before the spell went off, and at range where he had no chance to dodge, he did the only thing that made sense. He launched forward, combining a chance to get a double-leg takedown with the hope that he'd be too close to pyromancy to target him, without the splash hitting the elf too. He was scant inches away from the elf when he realized his mistake. A jet of flame erupted, not from the elf's hands but from the elf's heel, rocketing a kick towards him with the kind of speed that even an elf would have never achieved with muscle alone. Already committed to his takedown, he had no chance to dodge. He could only watch in admiration as the far too soft sandal flooded his field of view, crushing his nose and the elf's toes in one vicious move. He saw stars, felt his vision black out, and felt a second impact on the back of his head a few seconds after that. It took him longer than he cared to admit to realize that the second impact was him falling backwards and hitting his head on the ground. He opened his eyes to see the elf a few feet over, gingerly tending to his own badly smashed toes. They gave each other a short nod, and he reached up to his own broken nose, setting the bone and then healing it back together with one simple motion. He was in the middle of pushing himself out of the dust when the elf made his way back over, toes set straight, and offered him a hand up. He took it, and then transitioned the grasp into a handshake once it was on 2 feet. "Well done." "Ruthless enough?" the elf asked. Tom gave him a side look. He didn't like the smugness much, but he wasn't going to be stingy with praise for someone that had earned it. "You learn fast." The elf shrugged. "I have to if I want to learn from humans. I might have 5 sentences, but none of you do. Every moment that I'm not running to keep up is more knowledge lost." Tom nodded, lost in thought. He seemed to reach a decision. "Give me your sparring sword. I can return yours with mine when I go back to Sir Horace. Me and him have something we need to discuss."